Hey, I'm Jay Leeming, and this is the Crane Bag Podcast. We are exploring the Odyssey. We are making that journey through this story. This story which swims around us, this story in which we live, perhaps. This story by which we see the world around us, seeing things that would otherwise be invisible without the help of this story. And today is a day of monsters. Monsters? Yeah, monsters. There are monsters in this story. And what is a monster? Well, you could say it's a cartoon. It can be nothing silly. Or it can be something real forces in our lives. For there are dangerous things out there. It's not safe out there in the world. And the monsters teach us that. The monsters which are concentrations of hunger and anger, sorrow and grief, which are strange puzzles that want to mess with us. They do not mean us well. They are hostile to everything we are. And so these things are in the world, and we meet them in the world, and we meet them today in this story. And we remember that it is Odysseus telling this story. For in his travels he was welcomed by the Phaeacians, those beautiful people who were known for their hospitality and their kindness to strangers. So they took him in, and they feasted him, and at a feast they asked him what his story was, where he came from. And Odysseus told them the story of his journey home from Troy. And he told them about the Trojan War. He told them about the city of the Ciconians, which he and his soldiers sacked on the way home. He told them about the 9 days of storm sent by Zeus, which blew his fleet and his boat away across the sea, beyond the borders of the known world. And he told them about the island of the lotus eaters, where there is a flower, and if you eat that flower, you lose all desire to travel home. And he told them about the island of the Cyclops, that one-eyed monster. We remember how he told them about the island of King Aeolus. We remember the horns and the flutes of that island, and how King Aeolus gave Odysseus a bag filled with everything that would trouble him away from his goal, and how his sailors opened that bag. We remember the island of the Lastrygonians, hulking brutes who destroyed every ship in his fleet save the one ship upon which Odysseus was sailing. We remember the island of Circe, the magical lady of the beasts, who turned his sailors into pigs. But thanks to a magical herb given to Odysseus by Hermes, he was not transformed. We remember how, guided by Circe's wisdom, Odysseus and his crew went to the land of the dead and spoke with ghosts. And then they returned to the island of Circe. And now we climb back up into his voice. Now we climb back up into Odysseus's telling of this story. So we stayed for 3 days on the island of Circe, enjoying every moment, glorying in the leaves on the trees, hearing the songs of the birds. Everything seemed a miracle to us then, for we had been in the realm of bones and ghosts, whispers and shadows only. And after 3 days, well, there was a bonfire outside her house. My sailors sang and drank the sparkling wine. But Circe and I climbed to the highest peak of that island, and together looked out at the waves. There was a moon shining down, glimmering in the water of the sea. And though my eyes were filled with the beauty of that moment, my heart longed only for home. So I said, Circe, tell me, What lies ahead of us on the sea? Tiresias told me how to cleanse my life of the curse of Poseidon, how to wash that curse from my life. But how do we get home to Ithaca? What lies ahead for us? And she said, Odysseus, first you will come to the island of the Sirens. Beautiful women who sing music that is so beautiful you must not hear it. For every sailor who hears that music is compelled to come closer to that island, and that island is ringed around by sharp rocks. So many sailors have lost their lives there. The sirens devour their bodies and spit out the bones. But they are old as the universe itself, and they know many things. They are wise. They know all the histories of all the peoples of this earth, and the animals and the leaves and the flowers and the histories of the gods. So they are filled with the wisdom of this universe, but you must not hear this wisdom. You must fill your ears with beeswax and all the ears of your crew as well, and sail right past this island. And then you will come to a narrow place in the sea. And on the starboard side there will be an immense cliff, whose heights are lost in cloud. And you will find a cave in that cliff, and inside that cave lives a monster known as Scylla. Scylla has 6 heads, and she is very fast and very hungry. She will attack your crew, and there is no defense. There is nothing you can do. And on the port side, there is a small rocky island, and beside that island there is a great burning whirlpool in the sea. And in that whirlpool is Charybdis, a ferocious monster who 3 times a day swallows the sea down into her belly. She swallows ships whole, eats the crew, and spits out the timbers and the bones onto the sea. So you must sail directly between these 2 dangers. If you sail quickly, Scylla will only attack your crew once. But something must be possible, I said. Somehow, Scylla, we can attack her. Somehow we can subdue her or kill this monster. No, Odysseus, she said. Your cleverness will not help you here. There is no way to think your way out of this problem. No strategy, no plan will help you. This is trouble which must only be endured. But if you sail quickly between these 2 monsters, Scylla and Charybdis, she will only attack your crew once. You will only lose 6 men. 6 men, I thought. 6 of my crew which had followed me so long, which had gone to the land of the dead and back. 6 of my crew. And then, she said, you will come to the island of Thrinacia, an island sacred to my father Helios, the sun god. And I think you know what awaits you there. Yes, I said, I know. So we drank the sparkling wine down into our bodies. So we drank that moment down into our souls, that moment the moon glimmering on the water, a little wind far off. And down below in the forest, my men around the bonfire, singing their glad and joyous songs. And that night I slept for the last time in Circe's house, in her bedroom, and we shared in the delights of love, shared the delightful hum in our bones, singing together there, all night long. And in the morning I was awoken by the songs of birds. And we went down the spiraling stairs of her house, and opened the doors of her house to greet the day. The sun was shining, the birds were singing in the trees. So we ate and drank in her halls one last time, and then we said goodbye. My men went first, down to the boat. I sent them there. Eurylochus, go, make sure the boat is ready to sail. And I stayed behind with Circe. And she poured sparkling wine into 2 goblets, and we raised these into the air and looked each other in the eyes. Let us drink to the deathless gods, I said. Yes, said Circe. And let us drink to Hermes most of all, Hermes the god who does not stay still. So we drank that sparkling wine down and put the empty goblets back down on the table. And then the 2 of us walked out into the sunshine outside of her house, and we said goodbye. And then I walked away into the trees. And when I arrived at the shore, there was the boat. and it was ready for the sea. My sailors had prepared everything. And we got into that boat, and we took hold of our oars, and we pushed off from the shore. And a good strong wind filled our sail, and away we went across the wine-dark sea. And I looked back once at the island, and there on the shore I saw a great wolf watching me with yellow eyes. We had good sailing across the wine-dark sea. And I told my sailors about the island of the Sirens, and soon enough we saw it at the edge of the sea. And I went down into the hold, and I found a wheel of beeswax, and I hacked it into pieces with my sword, and I gave the beeswax to every sailor in my crew. Put this in your ears, I said. We must not hear the beautiful music of the sirens. We must not hear that beautiful music. And then, with the wax warming in my hands, I had a thought. Eurylochus, I said, tie me to the mast. What? Tie me to the mast, for I wish to hear this music. So he did so, and I said, do not listen to anything I say when we are near the island of the Sirens. And he nodded and went back to his oar. And we came closer and closer. And finally a sound came across the water. An ancient, old, beautiful, clean Himalayan mountain rosewater sound. A beautiful sound like silver poured from a jar. And in this sound there was music, and in that music there was the history of the whole world. I saw the gods being born out of the great stream Oceanus. I saw them thriving in the light like strong, beautiful flowers. I saw them all dying. I saw the tomb of Zeus on the island of Crete. I saw bees buzzing inside the cave where he was buried. I saw the anvil of creation, and all of us pounded out upon that anvil. I saw a great tapestry, and my life was a thread in that tapestry. I saw the war, Trojan War, as a pattern in that tapestry. And it was shimmering in beautiful rainbow colors, and it was a sound, and this sound filled me and made my bones hum. Turn back, I said, back to the island. You must hear it, you must hear it. And they looked at me with wild eyes, as you would look at a wild animal, and they kept rowing. And still the song soaked into my ears, into my heart. All the tragedies, the marriages, the funerals. I saw ashes and timbers. I saw all the history of this world, and then it faded, drained away. It became a bird, it became a mouse, it became a hair upon the floor, and I saw nothing more. And soon I heard only silence and waves. I was no longer contemplating the great tapestry of creation. I was simply a thread in that tapestry, simply a hair on the floor. I was myself, sweating, tied to a mast. Release me, I said. Eurylochus shook his head. Release me, I said. It's gone, it's over. And I broke into tears. And he shipped his oar and came to me. And he untied me from the mast. I envy you, he said, for you have heard music no one else has heard. And I looked at him through my tears, and I said, no, I envy you. And then I looked far off, and at the edge of the sky and the sea, I saw cliffs narrowing. Quick, I said, stay alert, keep rowing, look straight ahead, Pyramides. Aim for those two cliffs there. Go right between them. We must go as a needle through those two cliffs. And already I could see smoke rising from the sea. What is ahead, they said. What is ahead? What awaits for us? I said, on the port side there is Charybdis, a ferocious monster. She swallows the sea down 3 times a day. We must not be drawn into that whirlpool, for she is at the bottom. On the right, well, on the starboard side, there is simply a cliff. But steer clear of that cliff. Why, they said. Row, I said. Row, just row as fast as you can. And so they rowed, hearing the tremor in my voice. And I could see the cliff now. A huge cliff on the starboard side going all the way up into the clouds. Row, I said, faster, and I went down into the hold of the boat. And I took hold of my armor and put it on, and I took hold of a bronze spear. I will fight this monster, I said. I will kill Scylla, the monster who terrorizes this part of the sea. And I came up on deck and began to pace this way and that. We looked at the water. There were burned spars and timbers there. It seemed Charybdis had just finished spewing out the sea. We were in luck. We had come at a good time. She was not yet swallowing the sea down. And on the port side there was a small ragged island with an olive tree on it, and directly below that was the gulf, the gullet of Charybdis. And on the starboard side there was a cliff. I looked over it, scaling it with my eyes, finding there a dark cave, and suddenly, bang, out of that cliff came 6 heads, a 6-headed monster, and swept up 6 of my men, screaming into the air. We heard their bones crunch as she pulled them into that cave and devoured them. And my hand tightened around my spear, but there was no time to throw it. Useless, he was too fast, and I threw that useless spear down onto the deck and took hold of an oar. Row, I said, row for your lives! And we rowed, put our backs into that. Sweating, we went forward, past the great yawning gulf where Charybdis waited, and we went further, even as the cries and screams of my men echoed between those cliffs. We rowed with fear in our hearts. As the deer runs from the lion, so we ran from that place, paddling the sea, biting into that sea. And then, at last, those cliffs were passed, and we were through. And we wept and sorrowed, and gave out 3 cries for all those we had lost there to Scylla. And we took hold of our oars, and we began to row. And we made good time across the wide dark sea. And soon we saw an island ahead, an island green with grass and with trees. And Eurylochus spoke and said, Odysseus, an island at last. We must stop here. Let us stop here and rest a while. No, I said. This is the island of Thrinacia, a place sacred to Helios, the god of the sun. He sees all things. The golden cattle are on this island. We must not eat these cattle. You heard the words of Tiresias. If we stop here and eat the cattle, we die. No, we must go forward, past this island. We must not stop. Odysseus, said Eurybates, so hard, so ferocious, always on the run. The men have seen horrors. We need a rest. Let us go to this island and rest on the shore. I was there. I heard the words of Tiresias. If we eat the cattle, we die. So we will stop, but we will not eat. We will stop, but we will not eat. The gods will be kind to us. They can be merciful. Let us rest here for a time. So he spoke, and he persuaded all the sailors, and I could not talk them out of it. So we rowed into that shore, and our bow nuzzled up against the sand, and we got out. And we gloried in the firm ground beneath our feet, and in the trees and grasses of that island. And when night came, we lay down on the beach, and we slept. And then in the darkness, in the middle of the night, the wind shifted. It woke me up. I saw clouds crawling across the stars, blocking them out. And then a great wind began, and rain followed. dazzling down out of the clouds, pattering around us. We took shelter in the forest. It was a storm. And when we awoke, the storm was still raging. Shrieking winds were coming across the sea. I could see the whitecaps far out. The sun could hardly be seen behind the clouds. So we prepared ourselves to wait it out. But the storm went on all day and all night, went on all of the next day as well. In fact, the storm lasted for 30 days. Day after day, we were pounded by whistling winds coming across the sea. We could not go anywhere. We ate everything in our boat, all the food we had. We looked all over that island, found a few leaves here, a few roots there, but there was little food to be found. We went fishing in those storm-tossed waters, but there were few fish there. So slowly, day by day, we began to starve. Always hungry, we wandered that island, searching for food, and around us were the golden cattle of the sun. Proud, resplendent, gigantic beasts, glorious, each one a feast for many men. So they tempted us, but we walked beside them, not looking at them, not eating that food. But every day it got worse. Soon it seemed that we would die there, expiring on that awful island. It was Perimedes who said, finally, what everyone was thinking. Odysseus, we must eat one of these cattle. We are dying by inches day by day, dribbling out our lives. Let us eat just one of these cattle. We will make an offering to Helios, and what's more, we will promise to make an even greater offering when we come home to Ithaca. There we will make a great offering to the sun god. He can be merciful. He sees what a fix we are in. Odysseus, let us do this and live for a little while, instead of dying slowly, falling to pieces here, starving our lives out on this island. No, I said, no. If we eat the cattle, we all die, taken down into the depths of the sea. We will see each other in Hades, that's it. We will be shades glimmering in the winter kingdom. No, we must not eat these cattle. So we argued back and forth, and finally, disgusted, I walked away from the shore, through the forest, across a field, to a high hill. And there was a tree there, and I sat down with my back against that tree, pondering what it is I could do, how to find our way out of this situation. And then, weary with thought, I fell asleep. And I dreamed of Ithaca, and I dreamed of my dear son Telemachus, and of my wife Penelope. I dreamed that the two of us were sitting on a stone bench in the garden behind our house, and around us were the glad songs of the birds. And then I was awoken by the smell of roast meat. I knew exactly what had happened. I looked. Down on the shore I could see a bonfire. And something shattered within me, and I ran from that hill, across the field, through the trees. You fools, I said, you fools! This is death for us all! No, said Perimedes. We've chosen life, Odysseus. We've chosen life. And there was meat on spits over the fire, and other meat that was already roasted, and they were devouring this meat there with their hands, enjoying, glorying in the taste of that sacred meat, sacred to Helios, the sun god. This is death for us all, I said. And still they devoured that meat. And as they did so, as they filled their bellies, the golden hide there beside the fire, the golden hide of the ox they had killed and skinned, well, this hide began to move, began to creep and scutter across the sand. And then there came a sound from the fire, and the meat on the spits over the fire began a lowing, grunting sound as of an ox. And some of the men, seeing this and hearing the sounds of the ox, threw the meat away, and others devoured it down, every last scrap. And that night we slept beneath the trees. And in the middle of the night I was awoken by a sound, and that sound was silence. The storm had stopped. The wind had stopped blowing. Peaceful seas were out there. And when the sun rose, it was still true. The storm had stopped. There was no wind hissing mercilessly across the waves. And with a dark feeling in my belly, I said, "All right, then. Let us set sail." So we took hold of the oars So we took hold of the oars and we pushed off from that island. And for a time it seemed the gods would be merciful. For the sky was blue and the clouds floating through it. It was a beautiful day. Perhaps Helios would be kind, I thought. Perhaps we would be spared. But then, just as we were cresting a wave, just as it seemed we would escape, there came a sudden flash of light, and a bolt of lightning came out of the sky, the clear sky, and it hit the mast, and the mast fell cracking down onto the skull of Perimedes, and crushed his skull, and the life went from him, and his soul went down to the underworld, and his body fell into the sea. And a great black wind came across the sea, stirring up the waves, and it picked up our boat, huge like a hand, and then smashed it down onto the waves. Bam! And spars and timbers went in all directions, and we all went down under the water. And I fought this way and that and came gasping up into the air. I looked around. There was a shrieking wind on all sides, wind and rain circling around us, tearing us apart. I saw my sailors swept aside here and there, pulled, dragged to the edges of the sea away from the wreck of the ship. They cried out and their cries died, shattered on the sea, and our boat was like a shattered cup. And I looked, and there was the keel of the boat. I lunged forward and hugged that keel to my chest as another wave broke this way and that, and the black winds came. And soon I could see my sailors no more, and the wreck of the ship was scattered, lost on the sea. And what was worse, I could feel I was in a current. Yes, I was being dragged, not by the storm, but by some current in the sea itself. I tried to paddle in the opposite direction, but no, I was being pulled back towards the great cliffs. I looked, I could see them. I could see smoke rising from the sea, where Charybdis was. I was being swept back into the gullet of Charybdis. Would Scylla find me as well? Would her 6 heads come down and pick me off of this keel on the sea, this shard of my boat? I tried to kick and paddle away, but it was no good. The sea was fast, pulling me remorselessly back, and soon I was right there, and there was that ragged stone island, and at the last moment I leapt up from that keel and took hold of the roots of that olive tree. And I hung on as below me the sea dropped and dropped down into the fiery gullet of Charybdis herself. And I heard a great roaring, twisting sound and a crunching sound as the spars and timbers of what was left of my boat was devoured by Charybdis. For a long, long time I hung on as the sea went this way and that, as below me the fires burned. And finally, she spewed it all up again. The sea came boiling up again, and there was the keel, burned now. I lunged forward, took hold of it, and was thrown away from that place and across the sea. And the current took me the other way now, and I kicked and paddled with it, and soon I was drawn away, and soon I was free. Exhausted, I was thrown this way and that by the currents. I looked on the horizon for some shred of land, but I saw nothing. Listlessly, I kicked and paddled, trying to get somewhere, and then night came and I slept. And in the morning, Helios, the sun god, drove his chariot into the sky, and more currents pulled in me this way and that, dragging me across the sea. For 2 days I drifted across the sea, and finally, on the morning of the 3rd day, I saw an island, and I kicked and paddled that keel towards that island, and I came to the shore, and I crawled out onto the sand and collapsed on the beach. Around me were the cries of the seagulls. Around me was the sound of the surf breaking on the sand. And then I heard footsteps coming closer. A person. Not a man, perhaps a woman. I heard the lightness in her step. Closer and closer she came. And then I heard a voice, and I opened my eyes. There was a beautiful woman there, with golden hair. "Welcome, stranger," she said. "Welcome to my island. I am Calypso. I am glad you are here." And so she spoke, and in her voice there was magic, and there was silver, and there was golden rivers flowing. and already it pulled itself around me like a blanket. Already I was drawn into the spell of her heart. For she kept me there for 7 years, wrapped in the sweetness of her magic. And every morning I would awake and go to the seashore and weep tears, remembering my dear island of Ithaca. And then she would speak, and with her voice she would erase all memory of my home. All desire to go home was gone from my body and my heart. And then after 7 years, the gods decided that I could go home, and she released me. As when a girl opens her hand and lets a firefly out into the night, so I was released. And on a raft of wood I sailed across the sea, until Poseidon found me and threw down a tremendous storm that destroyed my raft and washed me ashore on your island. And so I was found by you, dear ones. But the rest of my story you know, and I will not say it again, for it is tedious to tell a story a second time. And King Alcinous stood up and said, Odysseus, thank you for your story. Thank you for the beautiful, strong river of your story, nourishing us here, a river we can all drink from and be refreshed in mind and in body. I say we must bring you home, lords and ladies of Phaeacia. Tomorrow we will bring this man home, shall we not? And everyone there yelled out in assent, yes, let us bring Odysseus home. And they raised their glasses and drank the sweet wine down. And that night Odysseus slept in a soft bed in the palace of King Alcinous and Queen Arete. And in the morning Odysseus and the Phaeacians feasted again in that banquet hall. And then once they had eaten and drunk their fill, they walked from the palace down to the seashore. And there was a beautiful boat and a crew. And there also were many gifts given to Odysseus by King Alcinous and Queen Arete. Chests filled with gold pieces, tapestries, spears, statues of all kinds, and they loaded these things onto the boat. And then Odysseus said goodbye to King Alcinous and to Queen Arete, and thanked them for sheltering him there on their island. And then he stepped onto the boat, and the sailors pushed off, and their oars dug into the sea. And Odysseus looked back, and he waved, and the king and queen waved back, and there was Nausicaa, and she waved as well. And then he turned and faced the wind and the sea. And that beautiful, magical boat made good time across the water. And soon it seemed they would come home to Ithaca. But as they sailed, Odysseus grew very tired. And finally, he fell asleep. And the boat traveled on, sailing on across the wine-dark sea as he slept. And soon the Phaeacians could see the island of Ithaca, could see smoke from the cooking fires of the houses on that island rising up into the air. And they could see Mount Neriton, and the hill of Hermes, Raven's Rock, and the cave of the nymphs. And they brought their boat in so the bow nuzzled up against the sand. And the sailors got out, and they unloaded the gifts given to Odysseus by King Alcinous and Queen Arete. They carried them across the beach and put them down on the sand beneath a large spreading olive tree. And still Odysseus slept. And they unloaded all the bright, beautiful things, a silver Sidonian bowl, a chest full of gold pieces, bronze spears, statues of a cat and a lion. All these things they placed beneath that tree. And finally, they picked Odysseus up, still sleeping, in a blanket, and carefully they carried him across the beach and put him down in the sand beneath that tree. And then the Phaeacians got in their boat, and as they did so, a fog began to drift across the waves and through the trees of the island. And they sailed out into that fog, and soon their boat could not be seen. And on the beach, as the fog drifted and circled around him, Odysseus slept. Hey. Thank you for attending to this story. Thank you for exploring it with me. Exploring it because, as I have often said, a story is like a landscape. A landscape we might be in already without knowing it. We might live there. And just as we might not hear the blue jay in the tree, just as we might not even notice the trees around us sometimes because we've lived there for so long, they are there nonetheless, and we live in a place, and that place speaks with us. We are in dialogue with it. So this is the Odyssey wilderness area I am welcoming you to. And I invite you to enter this story and find a place where it is good for you to be right now, on this day, hearing it today, in this moment. That's a guide into the depths of the story. And for everyone, it could very possibly be different. For me right now, a moment which snags me, which buzzes in my awareness, is Odysseus throwing down his spear, his useless spear, to the deck and taking hold of an oar, when he's confronted with Scylla and Charybdis. And Scylla has just devoured 6 of his crew, of his sailors, swept them up into the air, and she is eating them in her cave halfway up this cliff. And he had been prepared to fight this monster. He had his armor on, he had his spear there. Despite the advice of Circe, the wise and magical woman who we spent a year with, she told him that this monster could not be fought. But he decided to try to fight it anyway, and did not tell his crew, which was maybe a good idea, that 6 of them are going to die. But he decided to put on his armor and pace the deck with a spear and try to fight this monster. But this monster could not be fought. And Circe told him as much. She said, "This is an evil which cannot be fought. It can only be endured." So that's the question for us, is when are we at the limit of our powers, and what happens then? We're either destroyed or we have to grow. We spend our lives learning skills, learning to get good at things. It's part of becoming an adult. Driving a car, writing, talking, and then larger skills. You might learn biology. You might learn how to write a poem. You might learn how to make money in the stock market. You might learn archaeology, how to cook an omelet, how to bake a cake, how to talk with others in a welcoming way, invite them into your home, how to throw a party, how to roller skate, how to bicycle. We learn these skills, and that's good, and we should be proud of that. Yes, we've mastered something. And it takes a lot of work to learn anything, to play the saxophone. And then you get to a problem which you cannot solve with any skill that you have. And that's the situation which Odysseus is in right here, in this moment in the story. He's a character known for his cleverness. That's the first thing that is said about him by others in this story. He finds his way out of the cave of the Cyclops through his own cleverness. He solves problems for the Greek army at Troy through his cleverness as well. He is thoughtful, clever, inventive, resourceful. But here is a power that cannot be beat by his own abilities. So that's a question: is when was that in your life? When did that happen to you? And what was it like? And what happened? And how did you grow or not? I think for me, and I kind of want to invite other people in, even though I'm just the one talking because it's lonely saying this, but for me, relationship, you go to relationship and suddenly you're vulnerable and you're open, and there are problems there which aren't solved in the same way that you solve how to drive a car, how to play a song on the guitar, or whatever. Though all those other skills can be translated, and do give you abilities which help, certainly. But getting into relationship for me, in my 20s, let's say, here was something I was not prepared for, and I did not have the skills for relating to another person. And so I had to learn that, and it was painful at times, as it is painful. I think death also, for me personally, when my father died, right? I mean, in some ways you're prepared for that your whole life, in other ways completely not. It's a new territory. So a moment like this, it's an initiation, if I can use that word, into a larger self. You've got to become bigger than you were before. You've got to become someone who has endured, survived this next thing, this next trial. And how you survive, well, I guess that's up to you and the circumstances. But it's a moment of growth. And I long to see Odysseus grow in this story. And it seems like he's got to grow. He goes to the underworld. He does all these things. Is it just news, a story like this? Is it just a bunch of facts, almost like history? Or is it a journey of the soul? Well, that's up to all of us to decide. For me, I see it as a journey of the soul, among many things. He went to the land of the dead and now seems more filled with purpose to get home. Now he seems more determined, like, okay, I'm through messing around, let's get home. And one of the first things he has to deal with are these monsters which test him. First of all, being the sirens, of course. And the sirens are fascinating because they sing beautifully, but they also offer knowledge to Odysseus. And again, as a clever man, a thoughtful man, knowledge is something he wants. In many ways, that's the key to his wandering. He's somewhat empty, this fellow. He's not at home really anywhere. I mean, that's a possibility. So he needs to journey in seek of new experiences, new knowledge. Perhaps you know someone like that. Perhaps you have been someone like that. I will go learn this new thing instead of staying home where the trouble is, which is hard for me. So the sirens offer him not just beauty, but knowledge as well. And so that's a wonderful thing that he wants to hear, of course. And so outwits them by corking the ears, by putting beeswax in the ears of his crew, but he is tied to the mast to hear the song. He is restrained and trapped and pent up in a way, because that's the only way you can hear this music. Pretty wild idea, huh? This music, which is so beautiful, you will do things which will lead you to your death if you hear this music. And of course, they're women, and he's a man, so you could see it as all kinds of things, as attraction, romantic attraction, sexual attraction. They sing and they lure men to the rocks. And we could look at it other ways too, not limiting it by gender. Men and women both, perhaps, are lured by others, romantically or whatever, into disaster. Is that true? Well, I don't know. But it's a question to ask. It's a question this story asks, I think. It asks us to consider how beauty can drag us to ruin. How our love of beauty can cause us to be wrecked on the rocks. What does Keats say, the romantic poet? Now more than ever seems it rich to die, when thou art pouring forth thy song in such an ecstasy. Thou more than ever seems it rich to die, when thou art pouring forth thy song in such an ecstasy. Still wouldst thou sing, and I have ears in vain, to thy high requiem become a sod. That's from Ode to a Nightingale by John Keats, the English poet who died young and was amazingly talented. And that's him hearing a bird and wishing to be transported and being transported by that song and finding death in that song as well, something larger than him. To thy high requiem become a sod. We got to put on our translation headphones with some of these poems because they're older. They're not talking to us in the 21st century. They're coming from a ways back. But nevertheless, the feelings can reach us. The words can reach us. Still wouldst thou sing, and I have ears in vain. To thy high requiem become a sod. So I'll be dirt, but you will still sing. And that's a sobering thought. And in the same way, the sirens, well, they are pretty close to eternal, it seems. They'll keep singing. Odysseus will be dragged to his ruin. He will die, and they will keep singing. And in a way, their song gives him that vision as well, of a larger vision beyond his own life, the big picture. He gets the big picture from them, which is quite amazing and scary as well, I would guess. Confession time for the storyteller. I've changed the details slightly. In the original, Circe tells him to lash himself to the mast. I changed it so he thinks of that. Now, she's super wise and powerful, so maybe I shouldn't have done that. She knows more than him in this story, often. But it also seemed to suit his cleverness, and it's such a character trait of himself that he decides to do it. Now, of course, she spent a year with him, so perhaps she knows him very well, and that's why she suggests it. Anyway, build your own Odyssey. You can choose which one you want. Does she tell him to do that, or does he think it up? So we get the sirens, and then we get Scylla and Charybdis, and we've got to travel between them, these two dangers. Another experience I think a lot of us have had in life. You've got to find your way through a path between two horrible fates and make it through. And they do make it through, and they get to the island of the sun, where temptation comes at them. So this is 3 trials right in a row. I mean, bang, bang, bang. The sirens, beauty, which can lure you to your death. Scylla and Charybdis, which is, the overwhelming force, which must be endured. So it's a trial not of arms and strength, but a trial of the soul, of determination, right? And then we get the island of the sun god. And do we eat the cattle or not? Well, we know we shouldn't eat the cattle, but we do eat the cattle. We eat that other hamburger. We order that second milkshake. And then comes the heart attack. Ooh, well, I'm sorry to keep it real, but that's kind of the story, I suppose. They're not supposed to eat these cattle, and they do. And again, we can think of this in sort of Jungian terms. If every character in this story is a part of you, a part of me, part of us, a part of the self, then who are the sailors? Are they our lesser instincts? Odysseus sleeps again, sleeps and dreams of being home, even as that dream is being shattered in a way by his sailors. So we can see them as the instincts in us that are just like, let's eat, man. Let's eat. I'm hungry. Let's eat. Let's not think about the big picture. Let's not think about getting home. They forget, in a way, much as the lotus eaters forgot. Let's just eat this cattle because we're starving here. Let's eat now and hope for the best. And who among us has not felt that? Exchanging long-term happiness and well-being for short-term gain. Yeah, short-term gain is what it's all about. I'm going to drive to the supermarket. I'm going to order this, drink this beer, eat this cookie, whatever it is. It doesn't have to be food, of course. You exchange, you surrender, that you give up the long-term well-being of yourself and of your life to this short-term gain. So the sailors go for the short-term thing. Let's eat and be fed. And of course they are destroyed, and of course Odysseus survives. But only after being dragged back to these monsters again. Ouch. Yeah, back to them again. Scylla and Charybdis hanging from the olive tree there. It's interesting how olive trees come up in this story. Over and over again, he is protected by them or helped by them. And Athena, the goddess who looks after him, she gave to the city of Athens the olive tree. There's a story that they were looking for a patron god, and Poseidon came and gave them a spring, but it was only salt water, for he is a god of the sea. Athena came and gave them a olive tree. And when they saw how useful that could be to make olive oil, to eat the olives, to use the wood of the tree, well, she got the prize. And so Athens is Athens in her name. So in the story of the Odyssey, over and over again, we find olive trees. The spoon, the wooden spoon that Odysseus and his men sharpen into a spear in the cave of the Cyclops is made of olive wood. And there are thickets of olive trees. When he gets to the island of the Phaeacians, he sleeps the night under some olive trees. And there's an olive tree in Ithaca where he talks to Athena. And there's this olive tree at the rocky island, which he clings to as Charybdis devours the sea below him. So it's the Mediterranean. I mean, there are olive trees around, but I don't think it's accidental that it is a tree connected with Athena, his protectress and his guide through these voyages. And then he gets home, and he is asleep again, which is a beautiful detail. He is out cold. He's asleep, and they bring him onto the island of Ithaca. After all of this work, all this struggling, these years of travel, he doesn't actually get to be awake for the moment. He doesn't get to see the smoke from the cooking fires of Ithaca rising up to the sky. He is asleep. He's out of it, and they carry him there like a baby, like a child. And I love how it undercuts the heroic elements of this story. The great hero makes it home at last, striding onto the shore. Well, that doesn't happen. No, he's carried by others, and he's asleep. It's a signal, it's a sign of how this whole story works, compared to the Iliad, which is very achievement, bang, bang, war, and the sorrow of war. There's a lot of grief in the Iliad, for sure. But Odysseus is interestingly passive in a lot of this story. Things are done to him, like Charybdis and Scylla. He has to endure those monsters. He is taken to Ithaca by others. He falls asleep on Thrinacia, and his sailors decide to eat the cattle. So he succumbs to this sort of passive state, which we all go through, which is sleep. Which is the sleep that brings us dreams and brings us recovery. That's how our bodies renew themselves. So this whole story is a recovery and a renewal of his self after the taking apart of the Trojan War, you could say. And so he is brought home by the Phaeacians, literally carried onto the sand. And he doesn't get that heroic moment. This poem is heroic, but it's in a different way from the Iliad. It's a different way from big, huge stories of killing monsters. He doesn't get to kill the monster. He gets to be carried in a blanket onto his old home of Ithaca. And so when have you been carried? When have I been carried? And when have we depended on others for bringing us home to the harbor, to the home that we need and which we're nourished by? Here's a poem for you. It's by Rainer Maria Rilke, translated from the German by Mr. Robert Bly. It's you can handle it. It's a page and a little more. You got it. It's called The Man Watching, Der Schauende in German. I can tell by the way the trees beat after so many dull days on my worried window panes that a storm is coming. And I hear the far-off fields say things that I can't bear without a friend, that I can't love without a sister. The storm, the shifter of shapes, drives on across the woods and across time, and the world looks as if it had no age. The landscape, like a line in the psalm book, is seriousness and weight and eternity. What we choose to fight is so tiny. What fights with us is so great. If only we would let ourselves be dominated, as things do, by some immense storm, we would become strong too, and would not need names. When we win, it's with small things, and the triumph itself makes us small. What is extraordinary and eternal does not want to be bent by us. I mean the angel who appeared to the wrestlers of the Old Testament. When the wrestler's sinews grew long like metal strings, he felt them under his fingers like chords of deep music. Whoever was beaten by this angel, who often simply declined the fight, went away proud and strengthened and great from that harsh hand that kneaded him as if to change his shape. Winning does not tempt that man. This is how he grows, by being defeated decisively by constantly greater beings. Yeah, the storm, the shifter of shapes. So Rilke writing about how defeat makes us strong and how we grow from that. If only we would let ourselves be dominated as things do by some immense storm, we would become strong too and not need names. Ließen wir ähnlicher den Dingen uns so vom großen Sturm bezwingen, wir würden weit und namenlos. It's a little German for you. And then he refers to the Old Testament, Jacob wrestling with the angel. Whoever was beaten by this angel, who often simply declined the fight, went away proud and strengthened and great from that harsh hand that kneaded him, kneaded like bread, K-N-E-A-D-E-D, that kneaded him as if to change his shape. Winning does not tempt that man. This is how he grows, by being defeated decisively by constantly greater beings. Winning does not tempt that woman. This is how she grows, by being defeated decisively by constantly greater beings. Die Ziege laden ihn nicht ein. Sein Wachstum ist, der tief besiegte von immer größerem zu sein. Is that the journey? Is that the story of your life, of my life? To be defeated constantly by greater and greater powers? It's kind of cool, huh? Yeah, constantly. Failure, to fail, but to fail beautifully and grandly and in a huge way. What would that be for an ambition? We like to be in control. We like to look good. I'm smooth. I'm in charge. Everything's great. Yeah, look at him. He's doing well. Well, what if that's not the way it is? What if we grow by being crushed by greater and greater powers? Yeah, maybe that's our ambition. Maybe that's what we should shoot for these days. So this is the realm of transformation. It's the realm of initiation. Like what is called a vision quest or a wilderness fast, a wilderness vigil, which has been done around the world by people of all cultures, by folks in the Middle East, in the Christian tradition, Moses, Jesus, by people here on Turtle Island, of course, the First Nations peoples. You go out there and you fast for 4 days in the wild, and you see no one. You just fast. You let the wild go to work on you. Instead of you going to work on it, instead of you mowing the lawn, instead of you deciding how things should be, what things should look like. No, you're going to go out into the woods or the desert or the mountain. Go up on the mountain and be there for 4 days without eating, with no tent, and just be and see how you come back. So you might be defeated by a great power. So you might be kneaded, K-N-E-A-D-E-D, into a new shape. That is something many cultures are very good at, finding a way forward through these transformations. And these days in the modern world, we've lost that art, and we have to do it in sloppy ways, by getting sick, by having a serious illness, by having a car accident, by any number of processes by which we are broken down and then become something else. I think this part of the Odyssey is such a moment for Odysseus. He goes through some things which break him down and force him to become more than he is, which usually means more than you can conceive of, right? Because our conceptions, our imagination of what we could possibly be, well, they're limited, as they can only be, by what we know. So he hopefully goes on from this to become more than he was before. And we shall see in our next episode. There are more trials ahead. It's not just all easy sailing. Thank you very much for listening to this story. And you can find more stories on my website, which is jayleeming.com, Jayleeming.com. If you are able to join my Patreon community, that would be awesome. That's what helps to feast the beast. That's what helps to make this possible, to get these stories out there into the world. And folks in that community also get free classes and other stuff like that that I offer to them. So thanks to all those already in that community for making this happen. And yeah, may this story live in us and around us. May we see with it. Thank you, and take care.